Welcome to the Sharjah Voice podcast. We're here at Exposure International Photography Festival 2024. I'm your host, Neale Bailey, and I'm with Charlie Hamilton James. Charlie, you started off with a camera in your hand, age 13, and it's taken you to become National Geographic's photographer of the year.
That's
how do you say?
Photographer's Photographer Award 2022.
In 2022. Yeah. So that's quite a journey. So get us in. How did we get here from 13 years old?
Well, when I was a kid, I was very obsessed with kingfishers, these little blue birds that we have in the UK. So obsessed, all I did was read books about them and try and go and watch them. And I think I burned myself out and I had to do something else. So eventually I decided I want to photograph. And so my dad gave me a camera. He actually gave me his old camera for my 13th birthday, I think, so that he could go and buy himself a nice shiny new one. But that really sort of kicked off an obsession with photography, which I'm still stuck with.
Which is not such a bad thing.
No, it's not. And from kingfisher, it went on to otters, and so I really sort of, it's always been slightly two parts: there's the obsession with the subject, and then the sort of absolute passion for documenting and taking pictures and understanding aesthetics.
So so get to 15 years of age, you leave school? Left school?
Yeah, I left school when I was about 15 and a half. I grew up in the middle of Bristol, so a very urban environment, and all I wanted to do was go and watch these birds and take pictures in my blind. So I just stopped going to school. I'd get the bus out of the countryside every day, and every afternoon I'd come home like Cinderella, and my mum would say, "Where did you go today?" Because the school had been phoning.
Right.
And I went sat in my hide and photographed kingfishers. And Mum never really cared.
Was Dad upset? Oh.
Well, my dad died when I was 6. And
okay.
Yeah, my stepdad was. Yeah, he's a bit too big. I think he sort of cared, but he wasn't really involved. And I think Mum knew I was so on track that, a chemistry degree or whatever, and learning about his, none of it was going to help me do what I wanted to do, because I was totally focused from a very early age on what I was going to do.
Did you take any O-levels before you left?
I got 3 GCSEs. So I'm very unqualified. One of them was woodwork. I'm very unqualified to do anything.
You can do a lot with that, right? And GCSE.
I can make a dovetail joint.
Oh, there you go. So you leave school. What happens next?
Well, I actually got my first. I started working with the BBC actually when I was 14, helping them film kingfishers, and I actually got my first paid job with them when I was 16.
How did you?
Well, I grew up half a mile from the BBC Natural History Unit, which is where all of the big Attenborough shows were made. And from a pretty early age, I was in and out of that building as often as I could be. And the thing about kingfishers was, because they're by far the most beautiful bird there is in the UK, they're pretty highly sought after on TV back then. And I was the kid who could show people how to get close to them, because they're very shy. And because I spent so much time with them, the BBC...
You figured out how to...
Yeah, so the BBC would come to me, because, they could pay me nothing. And
the child label
camera operator could go and film them. So, and then actually, as I moved on to otters in my later teens, again, otters were highly sought after on TV back then. They're very shy, very difficult to see and film. But I became the go-to guy for those 2 species, which I kind of cornered the market in. Well, I still have, to be honest. I just made a film on otters in Shetland. And I first went to Shetland when I was 16 with all my saved money to photograph otters. And over the last 2 years, I've just finished making a film on otters. So it's not gone anywhere. It's all still there.
Did you ever see the film Ring of Bright Water?
Yeah, I did, with Bill Travers.
That would have been a bit before your time, but that was a famous...
Yeah, it was, and it's globally famous as well. Yeah, I loved it growing up, and Tarka the Otter was another one, which is your neck of the woods.
Yeah. So now you're involved with the BBC.
Yeah, so I all I wanted to be was a wildlife photographer, but it was very difficult to make a living as a wildlife photographer, so I kind of jumped ship into becoming a wildlife camera operator.
Was that through your connection with the BBC?
Yeah, well, I started swimming with wild otters, which no one had ever really done before. And the BBC, really in my late teens, and the BBC heard about this, and they phoned me up one day and they said, can I go and try and film it? So I did, and that kind of it just kept leading on to more and more bits of work. And eventually I kind of got onto the BBC's bursary camera operator scheme, which was a 2-year full-time employment. And then once I was on that, it was fine after, after 2 years I went freelance. And I actually made my first film when I was 26, which was I actually made it with my ex-wife. I shot it and we produced it. And the executive producer, a good friend of mine, was so incredibly disorganized that he never appointed a producer to it. So we ended up doing it. So at 26, I produced this film, which it was hugely popular and successful and was about kingfishers and otters. So, my career really kicked off at that stage.
Did you go back to school and say, I told you so, or?
Weirdly not. I got high schools.
That's just fabulous, though. So all of that stuff through childhood just led to the start of your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's just real obsession. And I think obsession with storytelling and image making and technical, I was always trying to push and innovate visually what we could do with these two animals, really, and everything else that I filmed as well, but really pushing the limits of what we could do and inventing equipment. The BBC was amazing back then and it still is actually, for being able to invent stuff to get a shot. And so I think, I remember getting kingfishers to dive into a cylindrical vase while a camera spinning around it at 100 RPMs and filming it in slow motion. Just crazy stuff.
So you have a very technical brain for mechanical.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I'm a sort of Leatherman and gaffer tape engineer. I can pretty much make anything, but it'll be
a dovetail in woodwork.
But yeah, and I think that sort of training in those early filming years sort of informed my later photography, which was originally very technical.
So where did you go after the film at 26?
I made like 11 more documentaries.
Were these all with the BBC?
Yeah, they were. I mean, occasionally you get co-producers like Animal Planet and Discovery and National Geographic, but they were BBC commissioned films, and I really did it until I burnt myself out of TV and decided I didn't like it anymore, and I wanted to shoot stills for National
Had you been shooting stills during that TV career period as a sort of part of what you were doing, or was something fresh?
I hadn't. I mean, when I met Kathy Moran, who's here and is one of our great people here.
Yeah.
Kathy was. I met her on a bridge in 2003, and I just won the cinematography award at a film festival called Wildscreen. And she had seen the film the night before, and I was proudly holding my gong. And I met her on a bridge. And my friend said, "Oh, this is Kathy. She's the senior natural history picture editor at National Geographic." I almost fell on the floor. Whoa. So I said, "I want to shoot pictures for you." And she said, "Well, show me some work." I said, "Well, I haven't taken a picture for about 10 years." And she said, "Well, come back to me when you have." And she said, "If you can take photos like your film," she's just seen it, "I'll give you a job." So I went away, and it took me 6 years to get my first story into and I worked every spare moment I had for 6 years to shoot kingfishers. Yeah. My first story. And they bought that. And
so did you spend the whole of that 6 years on kingfishers?
No, that was with my spare time, my spare money and everything I could. But after 6 years, they bought it, and then she assigned me otters. So my first two stories were otters. Yeah.
How did you feel at that moment? Did you feel like, this is it, I've made it, I'm at the top of the tree? Did it feel justification for all the hard work?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a funny thing about success. It's never as good as you hoped it would be.
The idea of it was...
Yeah, I remember opening the magazine and thinking,
okay,
all of that, and this is it. And it's the same when you make a film. And I think that what I've learned over the years is, so don't end game it, enjoy the process of doing it. And I think as I've got older and less career driven, I've realized to enjoy the process of doing it, because the final product or the final release is never worth, wasting time for. Enjoy that time.
Yeah, don't delay the enjoyment for the end game.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, you spent a lot of your career then with National Geographic since that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a sort of muddled few years where I'd make films and then I'd shoot stories, and then eventually, like 2014, I kind of fully jumped ship into the magazine, and was pretty solidly employed by them. I still am, but I mean slightly less now, but a good 7 or 8 full-time years, yeah.
And that led to the Photographer of the Year award in 2022.
Yeah, and I one of the things I'd set out to do was I wanted to be a broad spectrum photographer. I didn't want to just do one thing. So I started out shooting very technical pictures of animals. And over the years, I started understanding the value of emotion in photography and trying to figure it out and unlock it and move it into my photography. So I ended up, shooting these technical images of kingfishers, and 10 years later, I'm shooting human stories about human interest, and I'm shooting portraits, and anything I can do really to diversify my skill set.
So perhaps we could segue in then to your exhibition here at Exposure this year then. So this is an amalgamation of all these pieces that you've been putting together over the...
Yeah, the sort of visual style of what I'm creating now is absolutely a sort of collision of so many factors of my... the pictures are dark and funny and beautiful and awful and all this, and they're ultimately confusing, but they're designed to be powerful statements. And I think they've come about from so many different things. They've come about from my obsession with visual storytelling, my obsession with trying to understand emotion. I think they come about from me being bullied at school, and my defense was to be funny. So I learned to reconsider the world all the time. How can I turn something into humor? All these little factors in my life have come to. And now I feel like this project, the End Times one, which I'm working on now, is what I've always been looking for.
It's interesting because as much as it's a statement of a lot of different things that are going on in our world, is also an identikit of your life and all the things that brought to here.
Yeah, I mean, I talked on stage yesterday about emotion in photography, and spending a life trying to understand the emotion I bottled up from when my dad died as a kid. And I think realizing recently that search for my emotion in photography was actually just trying to figure it out for myself. But equally, without emotion, photography is powerless.
Yeah.
Emotion is everything.
Perhaps you could just talk us through 3 of the images that are in the exhibition to sort of give an idea of how that's playing out.
I mean, the most striking, the one everyone sort of defers to, is the giraffe with the red sneakers on. And that was, I was covering the drought in Kenya 18 months ago, 2 years ago. And it was, it was the worst drought in living memory. So, and I found this giraffe, and I took a picture of it with my drone, and it was a very awful picture because it had this kind of weird death shadow where it died in one position, and as it dried out in the sun, a tendon in its neck had pulled its head back, so it had this kind of weird shadow where its head used to be. And I was looking at it one evening. I was like, this is an sort of strong, striking picture, but it's only telling half a story. So what can I do to tell the whole story? I'm just looking at the end of the story, which was this thing had died of starvation, actually, with no water, there was nothing to eat. So I had a moment where I thought, I'll stick some red sneakers on it. So I phoned Pauline, who's this brilliant film producer in Nairobi, and I said, Pauline, please tomorrow can you go and find me 2 pairs of the biggest red shoes you can find? And she was wandering around the mall in Nairobi sending me WhatsApp pictures of different shoes until she sent the red ones. I'm like, I need them. And then she got me these 2 size 11s and biked them down and I picked them up. And the next morning I went and put them on the giraffe, and I put my drone in it. I was so terrified about anyone seeing me doing it. It was just me and Daniel, who was driving and guiding. And Daniel's like looking at me, what the hell is this guy doing? And then I got the picture and I looked at it later on the computer. I'm like, oh, wow.
And what was the reason for the red sneakers?
So the red sneakers, so this is the thing. You look at the picture and you're like, firstly, everyone thinks it's fake till they realize it's real. And then secondly, you go through a process of confusion trying to understand it. Is it horrible? Is it funny? Is it dark? Well, what is it? And then you read the title, and that lands the picture. And the title is The World's Going to End, But You Can Buy Cool Stuff. And the other side of that giraffe, as I was going to say, it died of consumption. You know, we as humans there's too many of us using too many resources for a planet that's running out of them. And the result is we're getting droughts like that. So I wanted to take one world and another world, and I wanted to put them together, and then you got the full story.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm sure it's going to confuse a lot of people and make them think, hopefully, when they come in to see it. Give us a few of your thoughts. This is your first time to exposure?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I mean, because you've had a life of amazing experiences, and this is just going to be another one of them. So,
I mean, I've never had an exhibition, so personally, to see those massive prints, I was so excited. But I love hanging out with photographers, and I like photographers showing me their work and wandering around the exhibitions together. So, and it's massive. That's I've been here for 4 days. I still haven't gone through everything yet.
Yeah.
I just went and looked at Nicole Tung's exhibition, and I was walking out. I was so moved. I was walking out trying to find her on Instagram so I could message her to say, "Oh my God!" And as I walked out, I walked straight into her. I was like, "Oh my!" And I never met her.
She quite just like, "Can you excuse me? I'm just messaging the guy."
I told her. I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing."
But this is one of the amazing things that you can go and look at the work of your favorite photographer, and obviously you guys are all very famous photographers, but not just look at the work, but actually speak to the photographer about the work, because you guys are all available, able to come and discuss.
Yeah, it's so funny because people come up to you and they're very nervous. I'm like, I'm just a human, it's 5-year-old.
It's okay.
Yeah. So, and it's like, it is lovely meeting other photographers whose work you admire and getting the inside track on it and understanding it. And, we all eat together every evening. It's lovely. I just, but it's very much, that's a very curated part of exposure experience, though, isn't it? That everybody, you have to have breakfast together, lunch together, dinner together, you're together. Yeah. It allows that exchange of ideas. Yeah, and just to meet new people, which, we live in a world so disparate these days on Zoom and everything else. It's nice to actually just sit and chat with people and not be in a great rush all the time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Well, perfect. So what's next for you? I just made a film for Nat Geo and Disney that comes out. Well, it's premiering in South by Southwest in March in Texas, and then we're going to premiere it in Europe in Copenhagen the following week. So is this quite nice to actually get a bit of, it's not a break because you've got a lot to do, but I guess a little bit of a break in some senses, just being here, relaxing a little. Yeah, I haven't done anything for months now, so... You're supposed to say, no, I've just been really, really busy. I just had to jam in my schedule. I've been signing orders. No, I live a life of just boom and bust. I just made a film for 2 years, and that's all. I was just frantically, and I was doing these pictures at the same time. And then I just stopped, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do nothing for 3 months. And this is the end of that nothing. Okay. And it's a really nice way to go back into it again. Yeah. What do you say to somebody about exposure because someone who doesn't know about this, say why they should come, I would say come because I think the diversity of photography here is nuts. It's got I was talking to Sandra Petacci this morning, who takes these extraordinarily beautiful, sort of poetic, abstract pictures of plants and landscapes. And to see hers alongside, say, Nicole Tung's, brutal and graphic pictures of war in Ukraine and things. The fact there's everything in between those two things is wonderful. Okay. It'd be very interesting for you to come back and see us exposure in a couple of years and see what being here, what influence maybe happened to you while you were here with the people to see what you were doing. Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday who said that, we're talking about inspiration, and we all get inspiration from each other. And I think, to wander around and look at all these pictures and then go away. And I don't know if and how I'll be informed by it, but it's certainly inspiring, whatever.
You know you will. It'll just come at some...
Yeah, and it might even be subconscious, but and who cares really? Because photography is like that. We're all bouncing off each other all the time, trying to get new ideas, try and re-understand things and try and reimagine aesthetics and imagery and everything else.
Well, Charlie, I really appreciate you stopping by. It's laid back at you. I know there's a bit of a schedule with things to do while you're here, but yeah, fabulous exhibition, and it's been great having you stop by for a chat with us.
Thank you. It's been fun.